Illegally Deaf is a podcast about overcoming obstacles. I'm Danny Burnside, and just this year, I was diagnosed with severe hearing loss. Oh, did I mention I'm a professional Hollywood voice actor? Funny how that goes. I've made the decision to own my disability and interview remarkable guests who are thriving in light of being disabled. Welcome to the Illegally Deaf podcast. How you doing, brother?
I'm great, Danny. I'm great. It's in Minnesota. It's a little bit of a rainy Tuesday evening, but that's good. I like the rain. I'm good.
And I got to congratulate you, whether or not you're a Minnesota Timberwolves fan.
Thank you. Just thinking about it. But I mean, I don't know. Like my reaction is like, you think it's a little too soon for that. We got to beat the Mavericks, and then I'm monitoring the Celtics Pacers game score to see how that's shaping up. I would just hate to lose if we get all the way to the finals to Boston, a city that has great luck and fortune in sports.
Please take Boston down for all of us in LA. Will you please do that for us, Dan?
Oh, please. I will.
You did us a huge favor by gifting us the Lakers in the first place. Now you can follow it up by taking down the Celtics in the finals.
100%.
I will just jump right into it, guys. My guest today is a neurodivergent Minneapolis-based artist and educator with a passion for creating art focused on disability causes, not the causes of disability. His goal as an artist centers on allyship, fostering consciousness and acceptance of marginalized populations and communities that deserve attention paid to issues that affect them. He loves to bring his experience as a caregiver and educator onto the stage and into the recording booth. He recognizes his disability is an invisible one and considers it more of a learning difference. In a nutshell, he's passionate about helping differently enabled young adults develop social skills, embrace their voice, and build confidence through the arts and improv. Dan, that is so cool and right up my alley. Pleasure to have you here, brother. Mr. Dan Britt, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Danny. Happy to be here and happy to speak, hopefully, the truth and justice.
Even just that little blurb, that last little thing that I mentioned, that's from your LinkedIn, helping differently enabled young adults, yada, 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 through the arts. That's such a beautiful, beautiful mission statement, Dan.
And I heard that phrase from, and I don't remember his name, but the Autism Society of Minnesota next to Minneapolis and St. Paul. I heard a gentleman several years ago say that he heard a woman, one of his friends, tell him, "I'm not disabled, I'm differently enabled." And I think that speaks volumes.
Okay, so you mentioned that you are neurodivergent. Can you just explain what that means? And under the umbrella of neurodivergence, what issues do you deal with?
So I am on the autism spectrum. I was born with it. My family didn't necessarily know that, me being a child of the 90s. So what that means is that I process social skills differently. I may interpret things differently. Sometimes I struggle with eye contact, with reading a person's body language. I can excel in many different areas, and where maybe not so much in math and science, but in our field, in the arts. The DSM-5, or DSM-4 rather, which was the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Disorders. Now it's the DSM-5. In 2003, when I was first diagnosed in school, and then I had a clinical diagnosis, I was 9 years old. In 2003, Asperger's syndrome was what it was called in the DSM-4. That's named after Hans Asperger, but he worked with children, and he would call them little professors, because what they would lack in one area, what they would have as a deficit, they would compensate in another area altogether of the brain.
You kind of alluded to the fact that many terrific artists are on the spectrum. I'm not coming from any place of authority here, Dan, but do you suppose that to some degree, all great artists are on the spectrum, more or less?
I think more or less, yes. All great scientists, Albert Einstein, J. Robert Oppenheimer, Thomas Edison, and even psychologist Sigmund Freud. I think there's all a dash of autism in genius and science and math.
I really love how you equated scientists to artists, because they're scientists are artists and artists are scientists, right?
Really, when it all comes down to it, yes.
Okay, let's talk about your childhood a little bit, Dan. First of all, did you sense any social difference in yourself as a kid, or was that just too advanced as far as the maturity thing goes? Did you sense any difference at all?
up until I was 5, right around kindergarten, the transition point is when I kind of stuck out. I would, do things for attention. Not always, but for example, during playtime, I might knock over a kid's Lego tower, ask a teacher a repetitive question. And that's when I first noticed I was kind of different. Again, I was fortunate to be with other individuals who were also being diagnosed as autistic, kind of the children of the 90s in the 2000s, having more and more schools began to have special education programs. But when I was in the mainstream, in the typical American first, second, third grade class, I sensed I was different. I first noticed one of my classmates making a list of names or something, and I wanted to make that list too during story time when the instruction attention was to be paid by the students on the book or the assignment. I was different, and I kind of wanted to make my own script, so to say, of the day's plans and what would happen.
You were thinking out of the box from childhood.
Yeah, that's fair. That's totally fair to say.
Were you always an artist, Dan? Like even as a kid, were you into art and music and painting and dancing?
I enjoyed art class, painting and drawing, singing and dancing. The more performative side came about when I was about 9, 10. But always, yeah, it's fair to say I was always performative, and we're lucky our generation, well, my generation and yours, because you're a little bit older than me, but like we had VHS, a home video. So I would, I remember performing for the camera and singing songs and like doing a little improvised dance routines. But it was from, I think I was in second or third grade, when an art teacher, when she used the term artist, not as just someone who paints and draws, not as a Picasso, Monet, Van Gogh, but as, a musical, as a singer like Mariah Carey, Celine Dion, Jennifer Lopez, or Elvis Presley. So that was when I first heard the term artist outside of a fine arts context and more of a performing arts. And then that was around the time where I said, yeah, I want to do this play. Mom, can you sign me up for this class after school? So in a way, yes, I've always been an artist, you could say.
It takes a lot of courage at that age to
It does.
willingly want, especially as a young male, just how it goes to like want to be
Yeah.
on stage like that.
And that's the age too, if I could add, like I was in some drama camp classes growing up where I maybe was one of only 2 or 3 boys, because most other boys were occupying that time in the summer, and gender wise, like they were, I mean, doing football or maybe a basketball camp. Whereas like you notice in like dance recitals, it's mostly young girls or female presenting individuals at a young age. Yeah, I guess I was kind of in the minority, but once young boys realize that they can be artistic too, there's really some growth that's seen. So I won't lie, sports was the first enjoyment. I wouldn't say the first love, but the first interest. I would go see with my mom plays up at the high school. And eventually I was in some of those musicals, summer stock theater later on in my life. But I would see that and then say, I can do that too, or I can do that like the boys I see in that musical too. But from a very young age, it seems, at least it seemed to me, that boys can do this too. Dancing and singing is not just for girls. And when you put it like that, it sounds like like very obvious. Like no, like everyone sings, but that was my kind of like grasp on it, if that makes sense.
Very similar experience here, Dan. I was an athlete before I was a thespian, and
Hmm.
sports was my first love. And I'm really glad. I value the experiences I had playing sports. And it
Yes.
wasn't until later in my life when I became a professional artist that I realized that a lot of my peers who are professional artists, many of them never played any sports. Now, obviously not 100%, but
Hmm.
many. And that kind of it was a little bit shocking to me. And look, everyone's different. No, not there's no one right or wrong way.
Oh no.
Personally, I'm very, very glad for the experiences I had as an athlete before I became an artist. Can you briefly tell us what summer stock theater is? Because I love summer stock, Dan, and I
Yeah.
haven't even heard summer stock in like a
I
decade or two.
I know. Well, and it's Danny. It's a little like, so it wasn't paid. It's like volunteer. So maybe that term is misleading. But the high school, Egan High School, where I went, suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and they still do a big production, high quality every year. They need full commitment. Everybody from mid-June to mid-July better, have an open schedule to be called for rehearsal basically every night. Auditions are in late May. They get going earlier mid-June and they finish up at the end of July. Music Man, Guys and Dolls, some of the shows I was in, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, Peter Pan, Cinderella, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast. It's very typical, often Disney flair musicals, but it's starting to change a little bit. I did that, but it wasn't until my high school years. When I saw it when I was younger, that kind of provided some inspiration.
Again, to put it in perspective, guys, it's staging an entire live performance, which sometimes can have 3 months or more of a lead up. You're doing
Mhm.
that in like 3 weeks in summer
Oh
stock.
yeah. Yeah, and there's a big announcement ahead of time. Ooh, what is so and so gonna do? Like is it gonna be Grease? Is it gonna be Hairspray? Like, and then a big drum roll, and when it's finally announced. And now there's their own Facebook and Instagram pages, but before that, it was just word of mouth.
So I mentioned that I was a camp counselor. I was teaching
Yes,
musical
yes.
theater, and actually we put on 3 shows that year, and one of the shows was Guys and Dolls. So there you go.
Yes,
Yeah, no,
yes.
we
Which is
did.
still I must confess I haven't been in that. I've seen it, but I
Mhm.
want to be. I want to be someday. It's a great show for, gangsters, 50s New York, of course.
Guys and Dolls is one of those classic musicals that even the general public probably knows some tunes from, like "Luck Be a
Oh
Lady
yeah.
Tonight," stuff like that. Like
Hmm.
there's songs from back in the day. Broadway was like popular music. We can't even relate to that nowadays. But like I'm
That's
talking
right.
like 20s, 30s, 1920s, 1930s. The music from Broadway, even the 40s, the music on Broadway was the popular music of social life. There's many people who know Broadway tunes, but they know Broadway tunes, even though they know Broadway tunes, right, Dave?
Right. I mean, you might be at a party and hear something from Hamilton, but it's nothing like hearing, like being at a speakeasy, hearing George and Ira Gershwin or Rodgers and Hammerstein at a garden party or a big soiree social event in the 40s, 50s, 60s. It's not the same.
So we did 3 shows that summer. We did Guys and Dolls, we did Pippin, and we did The Wiz.
Yes. Before I was a camp counselor, I was a camper first. The Autism Society of Minnesota does a camp in Lake George, Minnesota. Closest notable town it's at is Bemidji. Typical summer camp provides canoeing, arts and crafts, tubing on the lake, in tents, dining hall, all of that. And I'll tell you, Danny, starting at 11 years old, 2005, my first of 5 summers there, I was homesick. I was very much, I miss the cities. I miss urban and suburban life. I miss my parents and I miss my friends at the time. This is scary. This is being outdoors up north. I want to go home. And so back then, that was before I had a cell phone. So I would be in the camp director's office and I would use a calling card to call my parents. I should add some background to the camp director is a woman named Carrie Dunbaron, and she helped create the 5 point scale that many people in the autism community worldwide use to check in during
Wow.
a meeting or a classroom. How are you feeling today? Well, I'm at a 3. I'm pretty mellow. I'm at a 5. I'm going to cause destruction to property and myself and others. Okay, maybe it's best if I leave the room. Okay, thanks for letting us know. I'm at a 1. I'm a little tired. Anyway, Curie Dunburon was the camp director. She has a son who's somewhere out in Hollywood right now working with Key and Peele. Anyway, Carrie was very understanding and very patient with me. So for 3 of the 5 years as a camper at Camp Discovery, I was very much not enjoying it. Not like making friends and having laughs here and there, but not keeping connections. It was my 4th summer where the tide really turned, and I found a friend, Sam, who also liked musical theater. And by the 5th summer, I was pretty much by then in high school. I couldn't keep doing summer camp because summer community theater, the summer stock, they needed commitment all summer. So my 5th and last year was really kind of a not a sad goodbye. I took it for granted. I'm like, yeah, okay, moving on to something else. I was invited back to be a mentor. Before I go there, I start my camp counseling days started when I was in college. The summer between my sophomore and junior year, I went back. There was a day camp that no longer exists, but I was a counselor there. And through the years, I've been a counselor at Camp Discovery, the camp I was at, and another overnight camp called Camp Hand in Hand. And I've made connections with campers who were just as homesick as I was, and campers who were just really happy and ecstatic to be there and wanted to definitely leave the city and be in nature. And I keep making those connections as a staff. So now it's been almost 10 years that I've been a mentor, which is a little different than a counselor, at least in the context of Camp Discovery. I provided insight to other young campers about what life was like when I was a camper, and just if they could use me for a reference for any job application or anything in their future endeavors. What it all comes down to is I was a camper before I was a counselor, but that emotional experience right around when I was finding theater and leaving sports, I think that homesickness, that crying and sobbing and missing home, played a big part in my dramatic maturity, although it was perceived maybe as immaturity at the time, if that makes sense. But I now carry that over, what I've learned and how I've grown, to helping young people at the camps now.
What do you gain from helping young people? Like, what do you get out of it?
I think we grow life lasting bonds. We can check in with each other on social media. There's a camper that I was 5 years younger than me, so he didn't have exactly the same special education teacher that I had in high school. He was 5 years behind me, but because he was my camper and we're both from the same suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul, we've hit it off, and we can rely on, checking the score of the Timberwolves or the Twins or Vikings games and calming each other down in tense moments, being each other's advisors. And that isn't the only relationship. I like it a lot more. I've kind of been a brother figure. I should have mentioned from the start, I was an only child.
Mm.
So it helps having brothers who are friends, not blood brothers, brothers from another mother, so to say. But I think it's brotherhood and allyship have come from those connections.
Regarding your disability, how does your disability make you a better artist?
It definitely opens me up to intense scenes. Not only is there empathy, there's also something I could bring, a suggestion I could make to the director with all, respect.
I've always found that in such a highly competitive industry, and any artist does exist in competition, that's just the name of the game.
Hmm.
A fresh take. It's all about a fresh take. It's all about a different angle. I had someone
Yeah.
tell me at the beginning of my career, one of my first agents, actually it was my first agency, said to me, everyone's going to start this audition the exact same way,
Yeah.
except for the guy who books it. You know what I mean, Dan? And someone
Right.
like yourself who
Right.
maybe thinks a little differently, it's almost your nature to deliver a script a little different. And actually, that's a good thing.
Oh yeah. And it's too like the person who's gonna, yeah, deliver saying, I don't want my 12 a.m. Zoloft right now. Whereas I would, deliver it, I don't want my 12 a.m. Zoloft right now.
Why do you suppose it's fairly easy for you to be vulnerable? It's very difficult for a lot of people.
I think I can step into a situation because I've been I've been kind of helpless in the past. And there's a term called learned helplessness where I can be a little honest about my needs in the moment. Like I can ask for a break. I can ask for a fidget, something to squeeze, which is used a lot with us folk in special ed and in different types of occupational therapy. Like I can ask for that if I'm in an audition with no shame or embarrassment whatsoever. And I think that does showcase my vulnerability because I kind of, not always, but I will occasionally react to a space that I'm not familiar with in that way.
Okay, opposite side of the spectrum. In what
Hmm.
ways does your disability pose challenges? Let's first start with your professional life. In your professional line of work, in what ways does your disability pose challenges?
So sometimes the language and the wording can confuse me. And sometimes when I craft an email, I don't know the proper procedure or protocol because I've just forgot. One thing Danny, I can remember, I can remember if someone goes canoeing up in Michigan during the summers easily, but I can forget to take my medication during the day.
That's wild.
It's little
Yeah.
things like that. And I've got a little bit of ADHD too. So it's, yeah, it's, sometimes the littlest insignificant details to someone might be the most important for me. And I'm not trying to obsess over it, but just, pay attention to it. The biggest things too, I hate saying it, most people can go over my head on a day where I don't have my poop in a group, as my mom likes to say.
Do you feel the industry is going the right direction as far as acceptance of the neurodivergent, or do you think that there's still a long ways to go, or is the industry going backwards?
I think there's a long ways to go. And I don't just say that because nothing has come my way where I'm like, ooh, I'm getting this and other talents are getting this, because they know that other people have proudly touted or stated in their artist mission statements on their websites and LinkedIn pages that I am on the spectrum. Yeah, it is a long way to go. I think there could be more of an effort on the part of producers and clients to showcase the talent, to find the talent and find work for them. That's the way I can state it.
Okay, the follow up: in what ways does your disability pose challenges in your personal life? So we're talking personal relationships as far as you're willing and comfortable sharing.
I have found someone in the dating world that I'm happy, being in a relationship with. We'll see where it goes. I have the best potential hopes for it, but it has not been easy arriving at this point, because sometimes I will showcase too much of my extroverted side. And I consider myself like a 65, 70% extrovert, and maybe like a 30, 35% introvert. I overshare, and sometimes I don't share enough or don't share enough details. And I think that's because I'm too focused on what TV show I'm going to watch, I'm going to stream, what I'm going to eat, what historical fact. What was that episode that Paul Rubens appeared with Robin Williams on Mork and Mindy? Little stuff like that kind of takes my attention in the moment. I remember when I'm going through my friends, when I'm talking with my friends, I will very oftentimes just cut out too many details of the story when describing something that frustrates me. And oftentimes too, and I'm comfortable sharing this, when I do, to have a few adult beverages, I can get a little annoying and that can get on some people's nerves. But other times too, like I'm not being clear. So it's difficult when you feel you're not being understood as an autistic. I'll say in romantic relationships and dating apps, it's very hard, like going through rejection. And I was gonna say, Danny, I have a friend who, and this is kind of controversial, but if there were a cure for autism, if it could go away, they would accept it and take it. And I'm in the majority who will say, no, I wouldn't want a cure. It's part of who I am as an artist and how I create and why I create. But it's different for everyone, I guess I've come to learn along the road.
So, what are some of your hobbies nowadays outside of the arts? What kind of stuff do you play video
Well,
games? Do you like sports? What do you do?
the only three video games I really play, and I know I keep saying this, I'm a minority in my generation. Star Wars Battlefront,
Which
a
one?
little bit of
Original or the
one and two, but not any of the very new stuff. It's that SpongeBob, Krusty Krab, Battle for Bikini Bottom, and a little bit of Super Mario that I mostly play with friends. So I do some video games, but I like to take long walks and make lists and explore within reason politics. I don't lose sleep over that and what's going to happen. I like going to, and I get this from my mom, antique shows,
Very
like
cool. Love
old
it.
toys.
Antique Roadshow. I love it.
Eh, yes, and genealogy. I'm trying to get more to figure out my blood, the makeup of me,
Hmm.
the makeup of the performer in makeup, if that makes
Oh, I
sense.
love that. That's very cool.
Yeah,
Love that, Dan.
I'm getting in that. So the interests and hobbies are changing. It takes a really good book to captivate me with my ADHD. Maybe this happens to you, but I will read a whole 3, 4 pages of a book and go, wait, I need to reread that because my mind was on the
Definitely relate to
it was
that.
on Jason Bateman in that episode of Arrested Development, or something that my friend Joe said.
I'm still
Like,
laughing at your Paul Rubens, Mork, and Mindy reference. Dan,
I
that
know,
is
yeah,
incredible. I can't believe you squeezed that in. That's incredible.
I know. And like, with how many references I understand, one could call me an old soul or a
You
Renaissance
are,
man who
you
will,
are for sure. You are.
yes. And I saw someone, it was actually the wife of the director of the producers, the last musical I was in. And she posted something like, many people think this is what an old soul was, and it's this child just dressed, in a corduroy suit, plaid, hat, and it's very swag. And I just think an old soul can look as new as a pop star today.
What do you suppose you'd be doing if you weren't an artist?
Hmm. I think I would be, and many of my friends from high school, as I'm looking at a picture of a couple of them on a framed photo in my apartment right now, they're having families, and some of them live alone too and with roommates, but they're doing what they love. And I think I would be with them, like doing data entry. I'd be cutting down trees. I would be taking statistics from the government, because I do get a little of the math side from my dad, who went into mechanical engineering. Was not for him. It was too difficult. Realized I need to go back to school and be an accountant. So I think just maybe I'd be doing what he's doing. And I don't want to say, God, that would be so boring, but it definitely would be a little bit more. I'll use the phrase boring. Yes.
Where do you walk? Do you walk through the city? Do you walk in nature?
I will walk most anywhere around shopping malls, in the city, in rural areas. Had a professor in college and he must have had a system. He had a personal trainer where he walked around Japan the whole summer. So he was much thinner much more fit when we came back to school, all us theater majors and minors. If I could walk a great distance on the Great Wall of China, I would, or I would walk around Tokyo. So really anywhere and everywhere, Danny, I walk. I'm gonna walk to rehearsal tomorrow, to the show I'm in right now.
What's the show you're
And
in?
it's called Kumbaya, the Juneteenth Story. And I
Oh,
am
cool,
kind
man.
of a secondary antagonist, a southern good old boy.
Hmm.
And my daddy's a plantation owner, but the other plantation owner, I'm like, well, what you gonna do? Because I'm kind of the devil on his shoulders. So I have a relatively smallish part, but next year we might be taking this down to Texas, and I could switch roles with Logan, the other actor, and I would be Master Wade Turner, who is much more complex than my character, Angus Fuller. So it's Juneteenth, the Kumbaya, the Juneteenth story, written by a wonderful social activist named Rose McGee.
Live theater, correct?
Live theater, yeah. And they've been doing this play since '98, when Rose McGee first wrote
Is
it.
that right?
Uh,
Wow, so long.
Yeah, and I boy, like, no, we if we take it to Galveston next year, to Texas, that'll be really fun, where the history of the holiday was founded. But I would love to take it to it's not going to happen, even though both Rose McGee and her daughter Rosalind Harmon, who's one of the directors and the first woman, person of color mayor of a Minneapolis suburb, Golden
Awesome.
Valley, I might add.
Awesome.
Rose McGee, is from Memphis. I'd love to take it to Memphis. I went to Beale Street for my 30th birthday, and other locations in Memphis, Graceland, just several months ago. Saw the Civil Rights Museum where Dr. King was assassinated, and that was the highlight of the trip.
On your YouTube page, you've got some videos titled Building Character, and it's also
Mhm.
some live theater. This ties into what you're
Yep.
talking about now. I mean, you had to craft this character based on the text, based on the script. What is your
Mhm.
process building a character?
Close my eyes and I imagine that character's daily routine would be. It is very much my authentic weirdness that shows through. Now, I can't say I do that with every role. When I'm memorizing lines, and sometimes I just let the lines take me to a place in my memory. I can't explain how I do that, but I think it's the way my brain is wired. I think it's the autism showcasing itself in the best way possible.
Authentic weirdness is what we're all about, brother.
Right.
Love it.
And brother, that can look like stimming. You've heard the term stimming, shaking hands. It's what a lot of folks on the spectrum do when they're very excited or when they need more sensory output from all five, or it's eight senses: taste, touch, sound, sight, smell, proprioceptive, introspective, which is like hunger, proprioceptive, spatial balance. Where are my feet in relation to my back as I'm propped up in this chair? So it's all those eight senses that I take into my method of performing.
What advice would you give to someone who's kind of like you when you were a kid and really going through it? You know, someone who is struggling with their disability and the negative effects that it's having on their life. What advice would you give to that person?
Focus on the people who believe in you and trust you. Try out for your school's play and try out for your school's musical. And don't be afraid to ask, as I was saying, for a glass of water, for a fidget, and let, voices of authority, people in authority, know what you need to be successful when you're given the chance. That would be my advice.
When I read that blurb on your LinkedIn page that you are passionate about helping differently enabled young adults develop, embrace their voices, build confidence through improv and the arts, I instantly knew where your heart lies. And I instantly knew that you would be an incredible guest on this show. And I'm so thankful you came on, brother, because it's been an awesome conversation.
Thank you beyond wonders, Danny. It was a pleasure.
Guys, you can catch Dan on Instagram. He's got like a grip of accounts. Are you Dan Britt VO, or is your main "Cause It's My Last Dance"?
Dan Britt VO is my main, non-social, because it's my last dance, the Donna Summer song. Last
Love
Dance
it.
from the
Oh my
70s.
gosh, I love it, Dan.
Yeah.
Dan, thank you again, brother. Have a wonderful
Thank you
night, my
again,
friend.
Danny. You as well, sir.